Hello, hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, those who watch, who showed us your faces, and hello to them who don't have this possibility. We quite understand there could be problems with internet connections,
Yes.
environment, whatever. Feel free, do whatever you want to do. Yep. So last time we started conversation about the translation in motion. We were talking about the sonnets and actually how we can use the structure of the text for translating it in motion, and also maybe how we can use the meaning that presented in the text, the meaning, the atmosphere, whatever you can choose. There are different ways our participants here in Visaginas found how they can use the meaning, not only the structure. We will talk about that today. We will show you some examples of the translation tools of our participants here. And also we will propose you to create your own, at least one rule right here today during our meeting. And then at the end, you will receive the task to create choreography and present it if you want at our next meeting.
Yes, it's great to see you. Great to be with you all today. We've been continuing our progress in the studio here with the group of choreographers. And I think, it's been interesting. One of the things that keeps coming up is, when we're working creatively and we're developing tools for generating movement material, it's quite easy, and one could say, to do that, to make a rule and to follow that rule, and then you have some amount of material that has some characteristic to it. And that's a part of our work. I think we keep coming back to the challenge, the difficulty of working within the limitations, the fairly strict limitations of these poetic forms that we're using. And we're finding that it's useful to challenge ourselves, and for you to challenge yourselves. It's an invitation to really stick with the limitation of the form and just see what happens, because it's quite easy to come up with other creative ways to elaborate on that. But we're trying to use the limitation of the form, I believe, to get at specificity. Not only specificity of what we're intending, of how we maybe feel about the poem or what we take away from it and how it might inspire us, but how then does the actual structure give us a kind of skeleton for building the body, so to speak, the very specific body that we want to build. And of course, that can sometimes feel like a mechanical process. It can sometimes feel like it's taking us away from how we've been moved, perhaps, by the poetry. And I think that also presents an interesting challenge for us to try to understand how are we using what is inspiring us in the poetry to make something that is legible. Or I guess it raises a question: how much do we want our material to be legible? What does that mean, without catering only to an audience, but somehow holding true to what is unique to us, and then with some objectivity and having other people's feedback, watching, reading, what have you, we're finding that sometimes when we conserve the ideas of another person, it can free us from the limitations of our own ego, maybe, or our own imagination.
And what I want to add before we go to the instructions or tools for translation, that there was also a question during our workshop here from one of the participants. So this kind of translation is it actually a composition tools? So here we decided that we separate composition and translation. What I mean that when we do translation, we kind of very much use the text which is given, because here we work with the text and its structure and its meaning. So every time when we want to make a next step in creating choreography, we come back. So if there is I have a tool and I did something, and what should I do next? And then I go back to the text and I again read the text and I analyze the structure and I go deeper to the words, to the letters, to the lines, and I try to find the material there and then bring it into the choreography, again, using some tools. Composition for us, it's something different. It's something when we already have this material, then we can manipulate it with different goals. One of the goals is to go to present the deeper understanding of the text, of the poetry, which we took, like what we want to be inside the choreography, which we took out the text and bring there, or what else from our, I don't know, own experience we want to bring into choreography. So this was for us more composition. So what we do, so translation is not composition. Or if you want also, you can call it that translation is a part of a composition work.
Yeah, and I think as Anton is suggesting, it might sometimes feel a little bit difficult, or like there's a little tension there in that idea of trying to separate those two things, because of course we also are composing something when we're translating. We're making a thing. And by definition, that means composing, but it's to try to not be distracted by how clever we maybe can be compositionally, and instead return to the source material and let that be our guide. Of course, in another context, you or anybody else can do whatever they want, right? These are just kind of suggestions to try to be focused in our work so that we can try to come out with some kind of new and maybe specific understanding of what's useful.
Okay, go to the rules which we have.
Yeah.
Which was written by our participants for their own haikus that we proposed them to create their own rules to translate it into movement.
Right. So just to give it a little context, yesterday in our session, before yesterday, we had asked everybody to write their own haikus, to write 2 separate haikus using the fairly strict form that we think of. And in our class yesterday, they were tasked with essentially creating their own rules to use in translating one of their haikus into a movement form. And they did that, and then we had them work together with other people and combine their material. And then last night, we asked them to send us all of the rules that they had written for themselves so that we could just look at them and see what there might be to learn in how people are writing the rules, what's in them, how as a performer, if I'm given this rule or this combination of rules, what do I understand? Where maybe are the gaps in understanding? Where might it be useful to have additional information in the rule, especially if it's being handed over like a piece of writing or sent to someone when you don't have the luxury of being able to have a conversation about what you really mean. So these rules that we're sharing now are from the participants. And I hope you can see this document. These are just grouped according to the different people that submitted them. And of course, I have to say that, we're not worrying so much about proper English grammar here. That could be a conversation for another time. we're really trying to, but it did become part of our conversation about, okay, what's the word that I'm using here, and can we maybe find a different word that helps convey the intention of the person who's giving the rule.
So please read it. Now on the screen, I suppose you have there are two sets of rules from two participants. The first participants made 5 rules, and the second one made 4 rules.
Yeah, so take a couple of minutes just to read through them.
So just again to remind you that we're talking about translating the haiku, which means that there are always 3 lines. You can see that in the second set of rules that it's the translator, as we call it, use this the instructions, what to do in the second line, what to do in the third line, and using punctuation marks, whatever. And yeah, and in the third set of rules, you see that we just discussed it today. So actually, we divide our rules in 2 different types of rules. Let's say very gradually, let's say going from one to another. So one set of rules is the rules which are very clear about what you're doing, something. Use numbers of letters in line for the numbers of movement repetition. That's more or less clear. So you can just count a number of letters in the line and then create the same number of movement. Or maybe you see that this is not very clear here, numbers of movement repetition. Maybe it's just one movement which you repeat the number of times, which is the same as the number of letters in the first line. And another set of rules, like this one, is more or less structure and very more or less clear, because for anybody, any person could count the number of letters and it will be the same. But there are another rules, like the first one, use your emotions for doing the choreography, which is kind of very wide, very broad. Yeah, so which you can understand it whatever you want, how you will use your emotions, where you give this emotion from. Maybe you should take this emotion from the haiku, because there is no instruction that you should read the text before you do it. So maybe it's your own emotions which you should, and the way how you should use your emotion is actually not clear, which give you a certain freedom that you can do actually whatever you feel like you want to do.
Right, and that last one, this one up here, is really just an example that I think we pointed out that, and we talked as a group, that maybe there could be more specificity in this one, because it's overly general in some ways, and we're trying to get more at, again, returning to the text as the source, as a specific framework for working and building material. There was also some discussion here about, where was it? The use the atmosphere, number 5 here.
Number 5, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Use the atmosphere of the haiku to find a place for starting your performance. That's obviously, it's a very subjective, it's a very personal answer that each of us might find for that prompt. And I think it's pretty clear. It's open, it gives us freedom to have, as a performer, our own contribution to the material, but it's also fairly simple and yeah.
And what, and yeah, uh, yes, you have a question. Please,
Yes.
Stanislava.
Hello. I just wanted to clarify, just for myself. So you're putting those rules in place as a way of structuring the translation process. So it's kind of a methodology for how. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And these are just collections of approaches that we are experimenting with here. We're not in any way trying to say this is the best way or this is the only way. It's just trying to have all of our minds working together towards coming up with a variety of approaches that are, in this case, mostly we've been focusing on structure as the primary framework, structure of the original source material. Yeah.
This, you see, there's a new set of rules here. Now another next 5, start each line at a new location in space. So there are 3 lines. So you should start each sequence like of your choreography from a new location. We also had discussion today. No, it was not about this. At the end of the second line, use your eyes to make contact with the viewers, which also interesting. So at the end, you create some choreography at the second line, and then at the end, you stop probably and find somebody at the audience and make an eye contact, and then do the next thing. Pause for any length of time where there are gaps between words. So actually quite clear instructions. So you can, for example, in the second line, you have 5 words, meaning that there are 4 gaps between them. So that means that you will have 4 pauses in your choreography, in your movement phrase, let's say.
This number 5 here is offers an example of one that I find to be a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Choose the longest word. The number of syllables in that word is a constant rhythm of movement
in the
first 2 lines. So it's asking us, I guess, to use the syllables, the number of syllables. That's very clear. We can find that easily in the longest word. But it doesn't offer much information about how we're reading it. And it's suggesting that a constant rhythm of movement is to be defining a constant rhythm from how we're reading those syllables should be used in the way that we are doing our movement in the first 2 lines of text. So maybe you understand this. I think I understand it, but as a performer, if I were given this, I might need to have some more information. And so that's also part of what we're doing is articulating for each other, where are the gaps in understanding these rules? Because part of our goal is to see how many of these, if we can create a kind of archive of rules that's actually useful for people. Again, not to say these are the only rules, but and so part of that again is to see where more clarity can be found in the language that's being used.
So now we want to propose you, and and you will have 5 minutes for this to create your own rules for the haiku that you found. That was the task last time. If you haven't found haiku, we can propose our own. You can use it. I will find mine. It's okay. Yeah. So what you do, you will have 5 minutes and you can write 1 rule. You can find 1 rule or 2 rules or 3 rules, and you should imagine that you give these rules to another performer. So that's not for yourself. The rules should be very clear how the performer, the dancer, should use this haiku and the rule to create choreography. That should be simple enough, but at the same time, descriptive enough.
Yes, and I will just add that one of the things that came up the other day was the question, if you are the choreographer or the translator, so to speak, how much information do you want to give to the performer Do you want them, for example, to read the original poem or to hear it spoken? Or do you want to keep that to yourself as the choreographer, and maybe you share it with them at the end of part of the process? Or, you know, you as a choreographer, of course, have the freedom to determine your own creative process. But we found that it can make a difference when you are giving which kind of information in your process. We of course also understand and process information differently if we're only hearing it and not seeing it, or if we're able to see it and speak it out loud ourselves. All of these are different ways of getting at the specificity of how we understand a piece of material. As you think of your own rules, I would also encourage you to maybe quickly reread your sonnet, your haiku first, and remind yourself of something about the idea that you're trying to express in that poem, the one that you found, or the one, if you wrote it, you know, the one that you wrote, because that also wants to somehow be embedded in your work, theoretically, if we're trying to do a translation, but still return to the relative simplicity of the form. So take 5 minutes.
Now we have 2:42, so 2:47. Okay, and I will share the screen. If you want to use our haikus, you can use it. Yes.
Most of them are in Ukrainian, but
yeah,
one of them is in English.
Yeah, that's just a translation. That's not.
Okay.
Was it? Stop share. Okay.
So let's hear some of your rules. If
Some
you're
of your
willing-
rules.
If you're willing to share.
Yeah, maybe even just one, so we can be clear that you
Yeah,
understand the
just a few
task. Yeah.
Anybody like to volunteer?
I can start. I haven't finished
Okay.
writing them. I have one that I can
That's
share.
okay. Thank you.
So there are 17 letters in the haiku. Come up with a different hand gesture for every one of the letters and use the hand gesture in the same order as you find those letters in the haiku.
So that means that you should find for every letter the gesture and always use the same gesture for this letter.
Yeah.
So
there
yeah,
is-
So
this is-
every time that letter appears in the text, you repeat that same gesture.
This is somehow similar to the sign language and somehow, but we also, that's interesting that when we started the workshop here, we discussed that our first thing that one of our participants told, that was don't use sign language, meaning the sign language which already exists.
Right.
So because then it looks more like a illustration. So you just take letters and you give sign to every letters and you just make, this could be a choreography, but it is more like a direct translation, which is not bad, but this is it.
Thank you.
Any other?
This is all really just in the spirit of experimenting and out of curiosity to hear what people come up with. There's no right or wrong, really.
It's very interesting about gestion. Yes,
Gesture.
for letters, because yes, I think about form, about of letters. form of letters, some letters, and my proposition was choose 2 letters and create some form for these letters and put it in the choreography. When it's letters you see in the text, something like this. And
so
maybe-
taking the, do you mean taking the shape of the letter itself? Like if you think of a letter as an object, that you're taking the shape of that and somehow using that when you create movement? Is that what you mean, Olga?
Yes, but it's not exactly. I try to construct this letter, for example, like this. It's mean to create form for this letter, how it's can possible.
You
in
mean
any way.
you mean just to find some shape for the letter, but it shouldn't be the same like the shape of the letter.
Yes.
Just
For me, it's very
something. Like this could be
Yeah,
letter
yeah.
A, this could be letter B, or something like this.
Yes. But
Yeah.
I propose to use this form for 2 letters. Because when I start to read my haiku, what I choose, I think about meaning for this, you know. Think about meaning, and my imagination start to create some story or something like this. And for me, it was very important to use some abstract form, you know, and put it to my choreography, because I know that my choreography is very emotion all the time, and for me it's very important to have some abstract structure and put it.
So yeah, let's maybe kind of wrap up. So we can give a task.
Yeah.
So when we say about translation in motion, we say about it could be something very literal things like Stanislava proposed and Olga, or it also could be some very abstract things. But it is important that in between the text and the choreography, there are some rules. Like, you know, when you translate from one language to another language, you take the word horse in English, then you have a picture of horse, and then you know, in Ukrainian, this is king. Then, so you have a rule in the middle of 2 things, between text and choreography. So you have to create this set of rules for somebody who maybe not a dancer, but better to imagine a dancer, who can use this rule and create choreography for 3 lines of haiku. That's what we want you to do till the next time after tomorrow, our meeting. So you can create very simple choreography, even for 1 line, which would be good, and record a video and show it to us. This is one option.
Or perform it live.
Or perform a live if you want, just in front of your camera. Or just to create task of these rules, which we already asked you. You maybe will have 5 tasks, and we can talk about that. We can say, okay, we can use this task like this. Maybe Peter or me right here in front of the camera will take your tasks, and we'll try to create choreography right away. And you will see, okay, this works, or this doesn't work, or how it works, or how much freedom inside this task, or limitations, which is also a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, so have fun with this. Enjoy the limitation of it. It does not always feel easy to have to work with limitation, but we encourage you to enjoy the difficulty of that and just see what comes out of it, right? We're not trying to be geniuses. We're just trying to be workers, you know, working at our craft and learning something new about it.
And probably next time we can also show one of the choreographers which was created one of our participants,
Yeah.
or me and you,
Mhm.
and to show the set of rules which
went with it.
was used for this. So time almost finished. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
We'll be happy to see you after tomorrow again at 2:15. And this project is supported by Trust for Mutual Understanding and Movement Research GPS program. See you later.
And
Have
the
time.
American corner of Visaginas.
And Ukrainian Cultural Foundation.
That's right.
Yeah, bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank
See you
you for
after
being
tomorrow.
here. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, bye, bye.